3 people heard the sound Sheriff Dale Cutter made that morning in front of his office. Not a word. Not quite a scream. Something between a gasp and a cry that comes from the place in a man where certainty lives when that certainty cracks straight through. Deputy Rourke said later it was like watching a building collapse from the inside. The walls still standing, but everything behind them already gone. Nobody knew what the woman did to him, because in the 24 hours she'd been in Harlan's Crossing, nobody heard her say a single word. This is how it happened. 24 hours earlier, the dog was dying. Not the dramatic kind of dying, the kind with struggle and noise, the slow kind. The kind that happens in dusty streets where nobody's watching, where a creature just gets thinner and quieter until one day it stops moving and the world doesn't notice. The yellow dog, people called it, though the yellow had faded to something closer to gray under the dirt and matted fur. It had been somebody's once. You could tell by the way it still tried to stay out of the road, still looked for scraps near doorways instead of just taking them. Manners beaten into it long ago, back when it had a name. That was late afternoon when Sheriff Dale Cutter came out of his office. He'd been drinking. Not drunk, just the too whiskey mood that made him feel like the town was his personal kingdom, and everything in it existed for his amusement or disposal. The dog was lying in the shade near the water trough, not bothering anyone, not even begging. Just lying there with its hollow flanks rising and falling, trying to survive another day. Cutter saw it, walked over, and kicked it hard. The boot caught the dog's ribs with the sound of leather on bone. The dog didn't even whimper. That was the part that stayed with folks longest. Any other animal takes a boot to the ribs like that. It cries out, tucks its tail, scrambles away into whatever shadow will hide it. This one just fell sideways from the blow and lay there in the dirt, looking up at Cutter with eyes that had already stopped, expecting anything better from the world. Cutter laughed, wiped his boot on the edge of the boardwalk like the dog had soiled it just by existing. Then he hitched his belt, adjusted the star on his chest, and walked back into his office like he'd done something worth doing. Most folks in Harlan's Crossing had learned a particular posture over the past 2 years, the one where you're close enough to witness but far enough away to pretend you didn't, where you see something wrong and your feet forget how to move, your voice forgets how to work. But she saw it. The woman on the gray mare at the edge of town. She'd been riding in from the South Road, moving at the kind of pace that said she wasn't running from anything, but wasn't arriving with joy either, just moving, the way certain people move when the road itself has become the only home they trust. She was maybe 55, maybe 60. Hard to say with faces like hers, faces that have been weathered by seasons instead of years. Her coat was trail-worn, dark brown leather cracked at the elbows. Her hat was pushed back slightly, and beneath the brim her eyes were the color of creek water in October, gray-green and still, utterly still. When Cutter's boot connected with that dog, she stopped her horse. She didn't gasp, didn't reach for anything, didn't call out. She just stopped, and those still eyes moved from the dog on the ground to the office door closing behind Cutter. Something in her expression shifted. Not anger exactly. Anger is a fire that flickers and burns hot. This was something older, something that had been banked low for a long time and had just found new fuel. She dismounted, tied her horse at the post, and walked to the dog, knelt right there in the main street dirt without caring who watched. The dog watched her approach. Its eyes tracked her movements with the wariness of something that had learned the hard way that hands could hurt. But it didn't try to crawl away. Maybe it was too tired, or maybe something in the way she moved, slow and deliberate, told it she wasn't a danger. She ran her hands along its ribs the way a person does when they know exactly what broken feels like and exactly how to check for it. Her fingers were careful, precise. They found the swelling from the kick, the older injuries beneath, the places where bone pressed too close to skin because there was no meat left to cushion it. The dog's heartbeat was fast and shallow under her palm, scared. But it let her touch it. And here's the thing the dog understood, even if the people watching didn't. Her hands knew gentleness the way a traveler knows a long-lost road. The memory of it was there in her fingertips, worn smooth by practice and time. This woman had touched broken things before, had learned how to handle them without adding to the breaking. The dog's breathing slowed just a little. She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a cloth parcel, unwrapped what looked like dried meat, broke off a piece, and set it in front of the dog's nose. Then she stood, dusted her knees, and walked into the Dusty Well saloon. The dog waited until she was gone, then it ate. Slowly, like it was remembering how, and something in its broken chest decided. That one. When the time comes, I'll follow that one. Inside the saloon, the afternoon light came through dirty windows and golden bars that showed every speck of dust hanging in the air. The place smelled like every frontier saloon smelled. Whiskey and sawdust and old smoke, sweat and leather, and the particular staleness of a room where men spend their money trying to forget their lives. The woman took the corner table, the one with the wall at her back and clear sight lines to both the door and the window. Nobody taught her to sit there. She just did. The way you just do things that save your life. Enough times they stop being choices and become instinct. Otto, the barkeep, was a wide man with kind eyes and a careful mouth, the kind of man who'd learned to see everything and comment on nothing. He brought her water and asked if she wanted food. She nodded once, not a word. Just a nod. Otto brought beans and cornbread, and she ate slowly, watching the room. Not nervous watching, not the darting eyes of someone frightened, the steady watching of someone cataloging, counting, measuring distances, 3 ranch hands at the bar, probably honest. Their clothes were worn from work, not for show, and they laughed too easily to be men with things to hide. 2 men in the corner with the too careful posture of off-duty law. They held themselves like people who were used to being watched and expected it. Their hands stayed visible, their backs stayed to the wall. A young woman sweeping the floor near the stairs, maybe 22, 23. Her left eye was swollen, going yellow at the edges the way bruises do on the 3rd or 4th day. The woman at the corner table noticed that swollen eye, noticed it and held it in her gaze for just a moment longer than the rest. The girl sweeping noticed being noticed, looked away quickly, kept sweeping. That was when Deputy Rourke came in. He was younger than Cutter, maybe 28, with a loose grin and the specific arrogance of men who borrow their confidence from someone else's fear. He scanned the room the way Cutter's men always scanned rooms, asserting ownership with their eyes before anything else. His gaze landed on the woman in the corner. He walked over, pulled out the chair across from her without asking, sat down, leaned back like he'd paid for the furniture. "Don't recognize you," he said. His voice was casual, but there was an edge underneath, the kind of edge that said the casual part was a choice, and he could take it away any time he wanted. "Passing through?" The woman looked at him, said nothing. Rourke's grin ticked upward, like her silence was amusing, like it confirmed something he already believed about women and their place in conversations with men who wore badges. Asking politely, "Ma'am," he said, "this town has rules. Strangers check in with the sheriff's office, let us know their business." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at her food and continued eating. Rourke's grin dropped. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. I said she raised one finger, just one finger, lifted slowly from the table, held there in the space between them, pointed at nothing in particular. No threat in it, no anger, just certainty. Rourke stopped talking. He didn't know why he stopped talking, he told himself. Later it was just that the gesture was unexpected, that it caught him off guard. But the truth was something about it, about the way she raised that finger with the absolute calm of a woman who had stopped exactly this kind of conversation before, in exactly this kind of place, and had never once been the one who lost it, made his words dry up in his mouth. He stood, pushed the chair back, and left. The scrape of the chair legs on the wood floor was the loudest sound in the room. Otto watched from behind the bar, his wiping cloth going still on the glass in his hand. The young woman with the swollen eye had stopped sweeping. She was staring at the corner table like she'd just seen something she didn't have words for. 3 ranch hands at the bar exchanged glances. One of them grinned, not at Rourke. At the woman who'd just sent him packing without saying a word, the two off-duty deputies in the corner shifted in their seats. One of them got up, tossed a coin on the table, and walked out. Going to tell someone what just happened. That much was clear. The woman in the corner went back to her beans like nothing had occurred. But Otto saw the set of her shoulders, the way her hand rested near her water glass, fingers loose but ready. She wasn't relaxed. She was waiting for the next thing. For the response her silence had just demanded. Word reached Cutter before sundown, Rourke told him. Had to. Because when a stranger makes one of Cutter's deputies walk away without a word spoken, that's not something you keep quiet. That's something that spreads, and things that spread become problems. Cutter sat in his office, listening to Rourke's report. His face didn't change, but his fingers drummed once on the desk. A tell. The only one he had. She didn't say anything? Cutter asked. Not a word, sir. Just raised her finger, and I stopped talking. Cutter's jaw tightened. You let a woman silence you with a finger, sir. Get out. Rourke left quickly. Cutter sat alone, thinking, a woman traveling alone, asking no questions, starting no trouble, just sitting in a saloon and somehow making one of his deputies back down without a word. That was unusual, and unusual meant attention. Attention meant problems. He stood, adjusted his badge in the mirror, made sure his mustache was perfect, put on the face he wore when he needed to remind people who ran this town. Then he walked to the saloon himself. Cutter came himself. That said something. He didn't usually come himself for drifters. He sent men. The fact that he walked through the saloon door personally, thumbs hooked in his belt, mustache trimmed perfect, badge catching the lamplight, meant Rourke had said something that made him curious. Or uneasy. He spotted her immediately. Corner table. Back to the wall. She was nursing the last of her water, not looking at the door. Cutter walked over and stood beside the table. Didn't sit. Standing was his way of establishing height, geography, dominance. He was good at it. 40 years of using his size to fill doorways and conversations. Evening, he said. She looked up at him. And here's the thing that every person in that saloon would talk about for years afterward. The thing that made grown men and women go quiet when they tried to describe it. When she looked up at Dale Cutter, her expression didn't change. Not 1 degree. Most people, when the badge and the shoulders and the reputation walk up to their table, something shifts. Even brave people feel it. The small involuntary tightening, the readjustment of posture, the flicker of calculation about how this goes. She felt nothing. Or if she felt it, it lived so far down inside her that the surface showed nothing at all. Cutter noticed. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You're new in Harlan's Crossing, he said. The words came out measured. Controlled. I make it my business to know who's in my town, so I'm asking you directly. Who are you, and what's your business here? She reached slowly into her coat pocket. 3 hands in that saloon moved toward weapons, the 2 off-duty deputies, and Cutter himself, though his hand only went to his belt, fingers hovering near the revolver there. She produced a folded piece of paper, set it on the table, slid it toward him. Cutter picked it up, unfolded it. His hands, just for a moment, weren't quite steady. Not a tremble, just the barest suggestion that he'd noticed something before he even started reading. It was a letter. Official stationery, worn at the folds, but the seal at the top was clear. The territorial governor's seal. The letter was dated 8 months prior and addressed to law enforcement across the territory. It was a letter of passage and professional standing extended to Nora Voss, former field surgeon and chief tracker for the 9th Territorial Cavalry Regiment. It noted her service with distinction across 11 years of frontier operations. It requested that all law officers afford her full cooperation. Cutter read it twice. His expression didn't break, but something behind it moved. Like furniture shifting in a locked room, cavalry's disbanded, he said. His voice stayed even, but there was effort in the evenness now. This letter doesn't give you authority here. She looked at him, said nothing. Asked you what your business is. She folded her hands on the table, said nothing. Cutter's face reddened, not dramatically, just at the edges where the control begins to cost something. "You can't stay in this town without stating your business to the law," he said. "That's an ordinance. Non-compliance is cause for removal." She held his gaze. Somewhere behind Cutter, one of the ranch hands at the bar set his glass down very carefully. The kind of careful that comes from not wanting to be the thing that breaks the silence. Cutter tapped the table once with his finger. The sound was sharp in the quiet. "You've got until tomorrow morning," he said. "Present yourself at my office and answer my questions. After that, I remove you personally." He let that land. Let the word personally do its work. Then he turned and walked out. The saloon breathed. Otto poured himself a drink he didn't charge himself for. The young woman with the swollen eye was staring at the corner table, and the woman who hadn't said a word, who'd just been threatened with removal by the man who ran this town like his personal kingdom, was looking at the door. Cutter had just walked through. Holscher. The expression on her face was the expression of a woman who had just finished measuring something precisely and found it exactly as small as she expected. The dog found her that night. She had taken a room above the saloon. Simple. Clean enough. One window facing the street. She'd left the window open 2 inches against the heat, and sometime past midnight she heard scratching at the door downstairs, then padding steps in the hall, then a soft nose pushing at the gap under her door. She opened it. The yellow dog stood there. Still thin, still matted, but standing. It looked at her with those same hollow eyes, and then, as if deciding something private, walked into the room. It circled 3 times, an old habit from when it had a home and a bed that was its own. Then it lay down at the foot of her bed. Nora Voss sat on the edge of the mattress and looked at the dog for a moment. Slowly, she extended her hand. Palm up, not reaching, just offering. The dog sniffed, then rested its chin on her palm. She felt its heartbeat through her fingertips. Still fast, still scared, but not running. Not hiding, "I know," she whispered. The first words she'd spoken since arriving in Harlan's Crossing. Just 2 words, so quiet they barely disturbed the air. "I know what it's like." The dog's tail moved once, not a wag, just an acknowledgement, a signal passing between 2 creatures who understood survival and what it costs. She rested her other hand on the dog's flank, felt the slow rise and fall of its breathing. And for the first time in 8 months, since the day Sarah Mackenzie had died in that military hospital tent, with blood on the documents they'd been building together, Nora felt something loosen in her chest. Not peace. She didn't know what peace felt like anymore. Something close. The sense that maybe this time, in this town, she could finish what Sarah had started. What they'd both promised to keep doing, no matter how many times the world tried to stop them. The dog slept. Nora sat in the dark and listened to the town outside. The sounds of Harlan's Crossing at night. Voices from the saloon below. A horse somewhere down the street. Wind moving through the eaves. And she thought about tomorrow morning. About walking into that sheriff's office with something Cutter wasn't expecting. Not defiance, not violence, just truth. The kind of truth that comes with names and dates and numbers that don't lie even when the men holding them do. She'd been a cavalry surgeon for 11 years. She'd set bones in the open desert, with nothing but green wood for splints and leather strips for binding. She'd removed bullets by firelight from men who were biting through rifle straps to keep from screaming. She'd tracked Comanche raiding parties across 2 states by reading crushed grass and stone-turned earth, reading the land the way most people read Scripture, with patience and the understanding that every mark means something if you know how to look. And she tracked men, too, the kind who wore uniforms and thought the uniform made them untouchable. She'd built cases against them, paper by paper, witness by witness, until the weight of evidence was too heavy for rank or reputation to lift. She'd never in 11 years made speeches about it. The cavalry had a name for her among the enlisted men, the quiet one who wins things. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't meant to be. It was just what she was. The woman you sent into the worst kind of mess when you needed. It ended cleanly, without theater, without excess. When the regiment disbanded, she'd ridden south, looking for quiet, finding instead that the West had an infinite supply of men like Dale Cutter, and a shortage of people willing to look them in the eye. She hadn't planned to stop in Harlan's Crossing, but she'd watched a man kick a starving dog in the street and laugh. And something in her had simply said, "Here, this one." Not a decision, more like a door opening, the kind that doesn't close again until you walk through it and finish what's on the other side. The dog stirred in its sleep, made a small sound. Not quite a whimper, more like a sigh. Nora's hand moved gently along its spine. "It's all right," she whispered. "Staying. Just long enough." Tomorrow morning she'd be at the sheriff's office at 7, with a different document than the one Cutter expected. This one's she'd write herself tonight, by lamplight, in the precise, measured hand of a woman trained to write field reports that would be read by generals. She had everything she needed already. The town had given it to her without knowing. The land office records she'd memorized while the clerk was fetching water. The tax schedule she'd seen pinned to the wall at the general store. The conversation she'd overheard between two merchants in the street, talking about payments that kept going up. It wasn't much yet, but it was a start, and Nora knew how to turn a start into a finish. She stood, lit the lamp on the small table by the window, pulled out paper and pen from her saddlebag, and began to write. The dog slept on, and outside, Harlan's Crossing slept too, unaware that the woman in the room above the saloon was already at work, already building the thing that would end Dale Cutter's 2-year reign without a single shot fired, because some wars aren't fought with guns. Some are fought with ink and patience and the kind of silence that makes guilty men talk themselves into corners, and Nora Voss had been fighting that kind of war for longer than most people in this town had been alive. Tomorrow morning it would begin in earnest. Tonight she just wrote, steady, methodical, each word chosen carefully, each fact checked twice, the way Sarah had taught her, the way they'd done it together, before Sarah's accident that wasn't an accident, before the promise Nora had made at her bedside. "Promise me you won't stop. Promise me you'll finish what we started." She'd promised, and she'd kept that promise in 6 towns before this one, and she'd keep it here. The lamplight flickered, the pen scratched, the dog breathed, and somewhere in his house on the edge of town, Dale Cutter lay awake, thinking about gray-green eyes that looked at him like he was already finished. He didn't know why that look bothered him so much, but it did. It crawled under his skin and made him feel like he was back in the cavalry 15 years ago, young and stupid, and trying to assert authority he hadn't earned. He'd seen that look before, from a woman investigator who'd made him feel 2 inches tall without saying a word, but that was impossible. That woman would be long gone by now, retired, dead, something, wouldn't she? He pushed the thought away, drank another whiskey, and told himself tomorrow he'd remind this stranger who ran Harlan's Crossing, who'd been running it just fine for 2 years without interference from cavalry washouts with governor's letters. Tomorrow he'd put her on a horse and send her south, and that would be the end of it. That's what he told himself. But sleep, when it finally came, was thin and troubled, and in his dreams he kept seeing that finger raised in silence, and the certainty behind it that said words weren't needed when truth was already written. Dawn came to Harlan's Crossing the way it always did, cold and blue and unforgiving, the kind of light that shows every crack in the boardwalks, every stain on the buildings, every truth a town tries to hide in the softer hours. Nora Voss was already awake, had been for an hour. The dog had stirred when she rose, lifted its head, then settled back into sleep when she touched its flank, learning already that her movements meant safety, not threat. She washed her face in the basin, dressed in the same trail-worn clothes, braided her hair back tight, and looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. 57 years old, 57 years of sun and wind and choices that left marks deeper than weather ever could. She didn't look away from what she saw, never had. The face looking back was the face she'd earned. She picked up the papers from last night, 3 pages written in her careful hand. Not finished yet, not nearly, but enough to start, enough to show she wasn't bluffing. The dog followed her downstairs, stayed at her heel as she crossed the empty street. The sun was just breaking the horizon, painting everything orange and gold. Beautiful, the kind of morning that made you forget, just for a moment, that beautiful places could hold ugly truths. The county land office sat next to the courthouse. Small building, adobe walls, iron bars on the windows. The door was locked, but there was a sign. Opens at 7. Nora waited on the bench outside. The dog sat at her feet. At 7 exactly, a thin man with ink-stained fingers and nervous eyes unlocked the door. He saw her waiting and paused. "We're open," he said, "but you'll need to state your business." Nora stood, walked inside. The clerk followed, already uncomfortable. The office smelled like old paper and dust, and the particular staleness of a room where records go to be forgotten. Shelves lined the walls, filled with ledgers and deed books and survey maps. Everything official, everything supposedly true. "What can I help you with?" the clerk asked. His name was Patterson. She'd heard someone call him that yesterday. Nora pointed to the deed registry, then held up her hand. 5 fingers, meaning she wanted to see 5 years of records. Patterson hesitated. "Those are public records, but who are you exactly?" She produced the governor's letter. "Let him read it." His face went pale. "Cavalry. I see. Well, records are public." "But most people don't," he trailed off. Decided not to finish that sentence. "5 years?" She nodded. He pulled the ledgers. Heavy books, leather-bound, pages yellowed. Set them on the reading table. "I'll be at my desk if you need anything." Nora opened the first ledger. Started reading. She read the way she'd tracked war parties across the plains, not looking for everything, looking for the breaks in the pattern, the places where the natural flow changed, where something human and deliberate had altered what should have been random. It took her 40 minutes to find the first one. 3 properties. 3 different owners, all sold on the same day. August 14th, 2 years ago. All to the same buyer, Harlan Development Company. The prices were listed, all below market value, 40% below. If she was reading the comparable sales correctly, she made notes, names, dates. Amounts Patterson watched from his desk, pretending to work on his own papers, but really watching her. She could feel his nervousness like heat from a stove. "Those are legitimate sales," he said finally, "all properly recorded." Nora looked at him. Didn't speak, just looked. Patterson shifted in his chair. People sell for all kinds of reasons. Economic hardship, family situations. "It's not unusual," she wrote on a piece of paper. 3 sales. Same day, same buyer, 40% below value. What were the reasons? Slid the paper across the table toward him. Patterson read it. His hands were shaking slightly. I wasn't the clerk then. I don't know the circumstances." She wrote again. "Who owns Harlan Development Company?" Patterson stood. "I need to check on something in the back." He disappeared through a door behind his desk. Nora waited. Listened. Heard the back door open and close. Heard footsteps running, going to tell someone. That was fine. Let them know she was asking questions. Let them start to worry. She kept reading. Found 2 more suspicious transactions. Then a complaint filed against the Harlan Development Company 3 years ago. Filed by one Otto Brennan. Withdrawn 2 weeks later with a notation. Resolved privately. Otto, the barkeep. Not Brennan. Otto's last name was something else. But Brennan was a name she'd seen on one of those 3 property threads. She was finding threads. She copied everything into her notebook. Dates, names, dollar amounts. The kind of information that looks boring on paper but tells stories if you know how to read them. Patterson returned 20 minutes later with a sheriff, not Cutter. A deputy, young one. "Looked barely old enough to shave, ma'am," the deputy said. His voice tried for authority, but landed somewhere around nervousness. "The clerk says you've been here for over an hour." "That's a long time for public records." Nora looked at him, then went back to reading. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to state your business." She wrote on her paper. "Public records are public. No time limit stated in territorial law." Slid it to him. The deputy read it. Looked at Patterson. Patterson shrugged helplessly. "I'm still going to need you to explain what you're looking for." Nora closed the ledger. Stood. Walked past both of them and out the door. The dog was still waiting on the bench outside. It stood when she appeared. Fell in at her heel. Behind her she heard the deputy say to Patterson, "Who was that?" And Patterson's voice, tight with something, That might have been fear. I don't know. But she's asking about the development company. Cutter needs to know. Good. Let Cutter know. Let him start asking himself why someone with a governor's letter was reading 2-year-old property records. The morning was fully bright now. People were starting to move in the streets. Harlan's Crossing, waking up to another day of pretending everything was fine. Nora walked to the church at the edge of town. The church was white clapboard, small. A cross on the roof that leaned slightly to the left from years of wind. The door was unlocked. Churches out here usually were. People needed places to pray when the weight got too heavy at 3 in the morning. She went inside. The sanctuary was empty. Simple wooden pews, altar at the front, smell of old hymnals and candle wax. There was a door to the side, led to the basement. She'd seen it yesterday when she'd walked past. She went down. The basement was used for church suppers and meetings. Tables and chairs stacked against the walls. Windows high up near the ceiling, letting in dusty light. This would work. She pulled out 3 pieces of paper from her coat, wrote the same message on each one. Different names at the top. Basement of church. Sunset, bring your ledgers. NV. Then she went to deliver them. Marcus Webb ran the general store. Big man with worried eyes. He was sweeping his front step when Nora approached. Morning, he said, cautious. Can I help you? She handed him the note. He read it. Looked at her. I don't understand. She tapped the part that said, bring your ledgers. Webb's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about, she wrote on a fresh paper. I saw the county tax schedule. I know what you should be paying. I know what you are paying. The difference is 35%. His hands started shaking. You can't. If Cutter finds out, she wrote. Sunset. Basement. You won't be alone. Walked away before he could respond. William Hastings ran the feed store. Thin man with angry eyes. The kind of anger that comes from watching injustice and being powerless to stop it. She handed him the note through the window of his shop. He read it. His jaw tightened. Who are you? She pointed to the signature. NV. Means nothing to me, she wrote. It will. Sunset, church basement. Bring your ledgers and your anger. I'm going to show you how to use it. Hastings stared at the note for a long moment. Then he looked at her. Really looked. Seeing something in her face that made him decide. I'll be there, he said. John Reeves was the blacksmith. Old man with shoulders still broad from decades of working metal. But his eyes were tired, the kind of tired that comes from giving up. She found him at his forge. He was shoeing a horse, but his movements were slow, mechanical, like a man going through motions because he'd forgotten what else to do. She waited until he finished, then handed him the note. He read it without expression. I don't keep ledgers anymore. Gave up fighting 2 years ago, she wrote. I'm not asking you to fight. I'm asking you to witness, to show what happened, to let the truth do the fighting. Reeves looked at the paper, then at her. Truth doesn't fight men like Cutter. Truth just gets buried, she wrote. Not this time. Something in those 3 words, the certainty behind them, made Reeves pause. You're that woman, he said. The one who made Rourke walk away yesterday. She nodded once. What makes you think you can do anything about Cutter? People have tried, she wrote. I don't try. I finish. Reeves studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Sunset, I'll bring the old ledgers. From before I gave up, Nora spent the afternoon walking the town. Not hiding, not sneaking, just walking, letting people see her, letting word spread that the stranger was still here, still asking questions. The dog stayed with her. People noticed that too. The yellow dog that nobody cared about for months, now walking at this woman's heel like it belonged there. Sunset came painted in orange and gold. Nora was already in the church basement when the merchants arrived. She'd arranged 3 chairs around a small table, lit a lamp, laid out her notebook. Marcus Webb came first, glancing over his shoulder like he expected someone to stop him. He carried his ledger wrapped in cloth. William Hastings came next, walking with purpose, anger in every step. He slammed his ledger on the table. This better be worth the risk. John Reeves came last. Moving slow, looking older than his years, he set his ledger down gently. Haven't opened this in 2 years, he said. Hurts to look at it. They sat, all 3 looking at Nora. She lit the lamp brighter. spread the county tax schedule on the table, pointed to the official rate. Then she opened Webb's ledger, pointed to what he'd actually paid. The difference was obvious, even at a glance. "We know," Webb said. "We know we're being robbed. What can we do about it?" Nora wrote, "You don't testify. Your numbers do. Documentary evidence doesn't need courage. Just truth." She opened Hastings's ledger, then Reeves's. Showed them the pattern. Month after month, year after year. The same excess. The same theft dressed up as taxes. "He'll destroy us if we speak against him." Webb said. Nora wrote, "You don't speak. I do. With paper. With official complaints to the territorial governor, the county court, the newspapers." Hastings leaned forward. "Do you think paper can stop Cutter?" She wrote. "I know it can. I've done it before." She pulled out the governor's letter. Let them read it again. Then she wrote, 11 years tracking corruption in the cavalry. 6 towns before this one. Paper beats guns when it's the right paper with the right signatures. Webb looked at Hastings. Hastings looked at Reeves. Reeves spoke first. "What do you need from us?" Nora wrote, "Permission to copy your ledgers. Statement that these numbers are accurate." "Nothing more? We don't have to face him?" Webb asked. She shook her head. Wrote, "You stay home. I do the work." "You read about it in the paper afterward." Long silence. Then Reeves pushed his ledger across the table. "Copy whatever you need. I'm tired of being afraid." Hastings nodded. "Me too." Webb hesitated. Then he too pushed his ledger forward. "God help us if you fail." Nora wrote, "I don't fail." She spent the next 2 hours copying numbers, page after page, each entry precise, each calculation double-checked. The merchants watched in silence, watching someone who knew what she was doing, who'd done this before. When she finished, she wrote one more note. "Tomorrow morning. Stay away from town. Don't come in until you hear news. Trust me." They left separately, one by one, disappearing into the night. In the sheriff's office, Cutter was pulling papers from a locked drawer in his desk. Old papers. From 15 years ago, before he came to Harlan's Crossing, before he was sheriff, back when he was just a young man trying to make something of himself in the territorial cavalry. There was a roster. Names and photographs of the investigative unit, the ones who'd been assigned to track corruption in the Quartermaster Corps. He found the page he was looking for. And there she was. The photograph was small, faded, but the face was unmistakable. Lieutenant Nora Voss, field investigator, 9th Cavalry Regiment, younger in the photo, hair darker. But those eyes, those gray-green eyes that looked at you like you were already measured and found wanting. Cutter's hand shook as he held the paper. He remembered her. God help him, he remembered. He'd been assigned to her unit for 3 months, supposed to assist with an investigation into supply theft. He'd been cocky then, full of himself, thought he knew better than some woman investigator. He'd tried to give her orders once, in front of other soldiers. Tried to assert rank he didn't actually have. She'd looked at him, raised one finger, just like she'd done to Rourke yesterday. And he'd stopped talking, mid-sentence. Stood there like an idiot while the other men laughed. She'd never said a word to him, never had to, just looked at him like he was a child playing dress-up. And he'd felt 2 inches tall. He'd requested transfer the next week, gone to a different unit, eventually left the cavalry altogether, came out here where he could be the one people feared instead of the one being humiliated. And now she was here in his town, reading his records. "Oh, God," he whispered, "she's going to do it again." He stood, paced, his mind racing. She had the governor's letter. That meant he couldn't just run her out, couldn't arrest her without cause. And if she was investigating the way she used to investigate in the cavalry, he pulled out another drawer, found the financial records. The real ones, the ones that showed where the extra tax money went, the ledgers that connected him to his brother-in-law's development company. If she found these, if she built a case the way she used to, he sat down hard in his chair. "Rourke," he shouted. The deputy came running. "Sir, I want someone watching that woman. Every minute, every place she goes, everyone she talks to. I want to know." "Yes, sir." "But what do we do if she's just walking around?" "Then you walk around too. And if she goes anywhere near the courthouse or the land office again, you tell me immediately." Rourke left. And Cutter sat alone with the old cavalry roster, staring at that photograph. She'd been dangerous 15 years ago. Now she had experience, training, and from the look in her eyes yesterday, a reason to be here. He was in trouble. Real trouble. For the first time in 2 years, Dale Cutter felt something he'd almost forgotten. Fear. The ride south took Nora through country that was beautiful and harsh in equal measure, red earth and sage. Distant mountains still holding snow on their peaks. Sky so blue it hurt to look at directly. The kind of landscape that made you understand why people fought over it, why they'd kill for it, die for it. The dog trotted alongside her horse, happy to be moving, to have purpose again. True to Otto's word, she spotted the rider following her about 2 miles out, keeping distance, not hiding particularly well. A young deputy she'd seen in town, not Rourke. Someone greener. She didn't try to lose him. Just kept riding at an easy pace. Let him follow. Let him report back. The Brennan place appeared on the horizon just before noon. Otto was right. You couldn't miss it. The house was still standing. Small. Adobe walls thick enough to keep out the summer heat and the winter cold. But the barn next to it was a skeleton. Charred timbers reaching up like bones. No attempt had been made to rebuild. A woman was hanging laundry on a line strung between 2 posts. She saw Nora coming and stopped. Called toward the house. A man emerged, tall, lean, somewhere in his 40s, but moving like someone older. The kind of aging that comes from carrying weight that shouldn't be yours to carry. Thomas Brennan. Nora dismounted. The dog stayed close. Help you? Brennan asked. His voice was neutral. Careful, the voice of a man who'd learned not to trust strangers. Nora held out the governor's letter. Brennan took it. Read it. His expression didn't change, but something in his shoulders did. A slight loosening, like he'd been braced for one thing and got another. Cavalry investigator, he said. That's a long way from anything the cavalry cares about now. She wrote on her paper, I care about what happened to your land. Brennan's jaw tightened. He handed the letter back. What's done is done. We sold left. That's the end of it. Nora wrote, you sold under duress, after your barn was burned, after you were given 72 hours to accept a price 40% below value. That's not selling. That's theft. The woman from the laundry line came closer. Clara Brennan. She had her husband's careful eyes. Who are you really? Clara asked. Nora wrote, someone who documents crimes. Someone who makes sure the documentation reaches people who can act on it. We can't testify, Thomas said. We can't afford to make an enemy of Cutter again. We've got a daughter. We've got. Nora held up her hand, wrote, you don't testify. Your story does. I need dates. Details. What they said. What they did. I need the truth on paper. That's all. Thomas and Clara looked at each other, having a conversation without words the way people do when they've been married long enough to know each other's thoughts. Come inside, Clara said finally. The house was simple but clean. A table, a few chairs, a fireplace, pictures on the wall, and in the corner a child's toys, a cornhusk doll. A wooden horse. Clara saw Nora looking. Our daughter Emma, she's 8. She asks every night when we can go home. Nora wrote, tell me everything from the beginning. And they did. Thomas spoke first. About the land agent who'd come 18 months ago, representing the Harlan Development Company, offering to buy their property. Thomas had refused. The land had been in his family for 15 years. Had a good well. Stream rights. He wasn't selling. Then the visits started. Deputies, asking questions, looking for violations, finding problems that hadn't existed before. Then the barn fire. It was arson, Thomas said. His voice was flat, empty of everything except the truth. I know because I smelled the kerosene. Because the fire started in 3 places at once. Because my horses were untied and let out before it started. Someone wanted them to live. Just wanted the barn gone. Clara picked up the story. The next morning, Sheriff Cutter came. Said there'd been a complaint about fire safety. Said our barn was a hazard. Said we had 72 hours to either rebuild to code or sell the property. Rebuilding to code would have cost more than we had, Thomas said. And we knew if we tried, they'd find some other reason, some other violation, so we sold for $800 to the Harlan Development Company. The land was worth $2,000, Clara said. Minimum. Nora was writing all of this. Dates, names, dollar amounts, the smell of kerosene, the 3 fire points, the untied horses. She wrote a question. Who owns Harlan Development Company? Dale Cutter's brother-in-law, Thomas said. Richard Marsh. But everyone knows Cutter's the real owner. Marsh is just the name on the papers, Nora wrote. Will you sign a statement saying all of this is true? Thomas hesitated. If we sign, if this goes public. What happens to us? Nora wrote. The territorial inspector will come. He will investigate. He will find evidence of coercion and fraud. The sale will be voided. You will get your land back, and if he doesn't? Clara asked. If Cutter fights it, Nora wrote. I have never failed to finish what I start. Not once in 11 years, the certainty in those words, written in steady hand, no flourish, no drama. Just fact. Thomas looked at his wife. Clara nodded. We'll sign, Thomas said. Nora spent the next hour getting details, writing out a formal statement. Having Thomas and Clara read it, sign it, witnessing their signatures herself. When she finished, she stood, prepared to leave. Clara stopped her. Wait, there's something else you should know. She went to a small box on the mantel, pulled out a piece of paper, handed it to Nora. It was a complaint, filed with the county 3 years ago, against the Harlan Development Company, filed by Otto Brennan. Otto's my uncle, Clara said. He tried to investigate what was happening, filed a formal complaint. Then he withdrew it 2 weeks later, never told us why. Just said he couldn't pursue it anymore. Nora looked at the paper, saw Otto's signature, saw the withdrawal notation, another piece, another connection. She wrote, Thank you. This helps. As she left, Emma came running from behind the house. Small girl with dark braids in her mother's eyes. She stopped when she saw Nora, saw the dog. Is that your dog? Emma asked. Nora nodded. What's its name? Nora realized she didn't know. Hadn't named it. It had just been the dog. She knelt down. Let the dog approach Emma. Let the girl pet its head. You should call him Hope, Emma said, because he looks happy now. Like he found hope, Nora smiled. First real smile since arriving in Harlan's Crossing. She wrote on her paper and showed Emma. Hope is a good name, Emma grinned. When you come back, can I play with Hope? Nora wrote, When I come back, you'll be living in your real home again. She rode away with Thomas and Clara watching, and with Emma waving until she disappeared over the ridge. The deputy was still following. Half a mile back, trying to look casual, Nora stopped her horse for a moment, looked at the distant mountains, the endless sky, and let herself remember. Because sometimes the memories came whether you wanted them or not, and fighting them took more strength than letting them be. Military hospital tent 8 months ago. Canvas walls that did nothing to keep out the cold. Sarah Mackenzie on a cot. Pale, breathing shallow, blood soaking through the bandages on her abdomen. Riding accident, the report said. Nora had seen the marks on Sarah's horse, saw where the saddle girth had been cut halfway through, just enough to hold for a while, then fail at exactly the wrong moment. Sora knew it too. We were close, she whispered. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were sharp. So close to proving it. The colonel, the supply contracts. All of it. Don't talk, Nora said. Save your strength. No point. Sarah tried to smile. Failed. We both know I'm not walking out of here. Nora's hands were shaking. She who'd performed surgery under fire, who'd handled horrors that would break most people. And she was shaking because this was Sarah, her partner, her friend, the person who taught her that investigations could be more than paperwork, could be justice. Promise me, Sarah said. Her hand gripped Nora's with surprising strength. Promise me you won't stop, Sarah. Every town, every Cutter, every man who thinks the badge gives him the right to break people. Promise me you'll finish what we started. Nora's throat was tight. I promise. Sarah's grip loosened. She pulled the compass from her pocket, the one her father had given her when she joined the cavalry. For when you lose your way, she said, pressed it into Nora's palm. Find north. Find the truth. Same thing. I'll keep it, Nora whispered. Keep the promise, Sarah said. That's what matters. She died 3 hours later. Nora had sat with her body until dawn. Then she'd taken the compass, taken their unfinished case files, and she'd ridden south. 6 towns in 8 months. 6 corrupt officials brought down. Not with guns, with the weapon Sarah had taught her to use. Truth, documented, undeniable. Submitted to people who still believed the law meant something. And now Harlan's Crossing, town number 7, for Sarah. For all the Sarahs who'd died because they couldn't finish the work, who'd been silenced by men who thought violence could bury truth. Nora touched her pocket. Where Sarah's compass lived. I'm keeping it, Sarah, she whispered to the wind, to the mountains, to the memory. I'm keeping the promise. She urged her horse forward. The dog kept pace. Behind her, the deputy followed, unaware. He was tracking a woman who'd already won before the fight even started. She was riding back at dusk when Rourke blocked the road. Not the young deputy, Rourke himself, sitting on his horse in the middle of the trail. Gun drawn, not aimed, just visible. Sheriff says you're asking dangerous questions, he said. Nora stopped her horse. Didn't dismount. Just looked at him, right on tonight, while you can. Silence stretched between them. 15 seconds that felt like eternity. Rourke shifted in his saddle. I'm serious, lady. She reached slowly into her saddlebag. Rourke tensed. Don't! She pulled out a piece of paper, unfolded it, held it up so he could read in the fading light. It was a list, written in her careful hand. Lucas Rourke, assaults charges, 4. Extortion, 2. False arrest, 1. Rourke's face went white. Nora wrote a new note, handed it to him. I have statements, witnesses, dates. You can ride with Cutter when it falls, or you can walk away now. Rourke stared at the paper, his gun hand lowering slowly. He'll kill me if I desert. Nora wrote. He won't have time. She rode past him. Didn't look back. Rourke sat in the road, alone, the paper in his hand, realizing she hadn't threatened violence. She'd threatened truth. And truth, he was beginning to understand, was far more dangerous. Nora returned to the saloon as night fell. She ate dinner in silence. The dog under her table, Deputy Harris entered, drunk, even at this early hour. His uniform disheveled, face flushed. He saw Nora, saw the dog. Something mean came into his eyes. That's the dog Cutter kicked, he said loudly. Followed you like you're its master now. That's stealing. Nora kept eating. Didn't respond. Harris stumbled toward her table. I'm talking to you. She looked up at him. You think you're something special, Harris slurred. Walking around, asking questions, making people nervous. Nora wrote, Get out of my way, showed it to him. Harris laughed. Mean sound, or what? From behind the bar, Carrie appeared, the girl with the swollen eye, watching, her face tight with fear. Harris saw her. Get back to work, Calhoun. Nobody wants. He stopped, realized what he'd said, the name. Calhoun. Nora's eyes sharpened. Harris's face went white. I didn't, but the damage was done. The slip had been made. Carrie backed into the saloon doorway. Harris looked around to see who'd heard. Otto was there now. He'd heard. His expression was grim, and Nora, she'd heard. And she was looking at Carrie with new understanding. You didn't hear that, Harris stammered. Nobody heard that. Nobody heard that. Otto stepped forward. You're drunk, Harris. Go sleep it off. Move, old man. No. Otto's voice was steady, and for the first time in 3 years, he stood like he had when he wore a marshal's badge. You're not coming in here. Not like this. Harris reached for his gun. Otto pulled a shotgun from behind the bar. Didn't aim it, just held it across his body. I said no. The saloon went quiet. People stopped. Watched. This was new. Otto hadn't stood up to anyone in years. Harris looked at the shotgun, at Otto's eyes. The people watching. He backed down. You'll regret this. I've regretted plenty, Otto said. This won't be on the list. Harris stumbled out. Cursing, Nora stood. Walked to the bar where Carrie was shaking. Otto looked at both of them. Upstairs. We need to talk. In Nora's room, Carrie sat on the bed. Tears running down her face. Otto stood by the window, keeping watch. Nora wrote, Calhoun. Carrie looked at Otto, silently asking permission. Otto nodded. She deserves to know. If you trust her. Carrie wiped her eyes. My father is Thomas Calhoun. He owned a homestead north of here. Cutter's brother-in-law wanted it. When my father wouldn't sell, they arrested him. Said he'd stolen cattle. Beat him in the jail until he signed a confession. She took a shaky breath. He was convicted on that confession. Served 6 months. Lost the land while he was in prison. By the time he got out, everything was gone. The property, our savings. Everything, Nora wrote. Where is he now? Dead, Carrie said. Died 2 years ago. Broken from the beating. From losing everything, she looked at Nora with red eyes. I came back 6 months ago. Changed my name. Took this job. I've been gathering information. Names. Dates. Anything that might help. Nora wrote. Why didn't you go to the authorities? I tried, Carrie said. Nothing happened. They said my father's conviction was legitimate. Otto spoke up. I knew who she was. I've been protecting her secret, Nora wrote. Can you testify? Carrie's face went pale. If Cutter knows for sure, Nora pulled out Sarah's compass. Set it on the table. Wrote, Sarah Mackenzie, my partner. She testified against corrupt officers. They killed her for it. I was afraid too. Still am. But I made her a promise. Some promises are more important than fear. She pushed the compass toward Carrie. Carrie picked it up, hands shaking. I don't know if I can, she whispered. Nora wrote, You don't have to decide now. Tomorrow morning there will be a choice. You'll know which one you can live with. She left the compass on the table. After Carrie left, Otto stayed. Miss Voss, he said, Harris will tell Cutter about the name. About me standing up, Nora wrote, Good. Let Cutter know his men are scared. Let him know the town is waking up. Otto pulled out a piece of paper. There's something else. The county seal. You'll need it to make your complaint official. He handed her the note. Courthouse basement. East filing cabinet. Third drawer. Lock's broken. Nora looked at him, questioning. I tried 3 years ago, Otto said quietly. Tried to stop Cutter. He threatened my daughter, Rachel. I backed down, resigned. She left town in shame. He looked at his hands. I'm not a brave man, but maybe I can help a brave woman, Nora wrote. Helping is brave. After he left, Nora sat at her table, spread out all her documents, the merchant ledgers, the land records, the Brennan statement, Carrie's story, Otto's failed complaint, pieces, all pieces. Now she had to make them speak together. She lit the lamp, pulled out fresh paper, and began to write. The document took shape over hours. Section 1, tax fraud. Section 2, land theft through coercion. Section 3, violence and intimidation. Section 4, legal analysis. Section 5, evidence submitted. Section 6, requested section. Her hand cramped. She flexed her fingers, kept writing. Hope slept at her feet. The dog she'd named, the living proof that broken things could heal. Outside the town slept, unaware that above the saloon, a woman was building the case that would end Dale Cutter's reign, word by word, fact by fact, truth by truth, the way Sarah had taught her, the way she'd done it 6 times before, the way she'd do it as many times as it took, until the promise was kept, until justice was served, until silence spoke louder than any scream ever could. The final paragraph was simple. The evidence speaks for itself. The pattern is clear. Sheriff Dale Cutter has used his position to enrich himself and his family through systematic theft, coercion, and violence. The people of Harlan's Crossing deserve better. The law demands it. I respectfully request immediate action. She signed it. Nora Voss, former lieutenant, 9th Territorial Cavalry Regiment, field investigator. Then she prepared 3 copies. One for the Territorial Governor's Office, one for the County Court of Appeals, one for the Prescott Courier Regional Editor. She would mail them tomorrow. But first, she needed one more thing, the county seal, to make it official, to make it impossible to ignore. Otto had told her where to find it. Courthouse basement, east filing cabinet, 3rd drawer. She looked at the window. Full dark now, past midnight, probably. Good. The courthouse would be empty. She touched Hope's head. Stay, she whispered. I'll be back. Hope opened one eye, closed it again, trusting. Nora put on her coat, checked that her papers were secure, and slipped out the window onto the roof of the saloon's back porch. The courthouse stood dark against the star-filled sky. Nora moved through the shadows, stayed off the main street, used the alleys, the spaces between buildings where lamplight didn't reach. 11 years in the cavalry had taught her how to move through hostile territory, how to make yourself invisible even in plain sight, how to read a building's weaknesses by the way shadows fell. The courthouse was old, adobe and wood, built before the town had money for proper construction. That meant gaps, loose windows, doors that didn't quite fit their frames. She approached from the back, found the basement window Otto had mentioned was loose in its frame, old building, old maintenance. Or maybe Otto had loosened it himself years ago when he was marshal and needed access to records after hours. She tested it, gave easily. She looked around. The street was empty, just the wind moving through the eaves, the distant sound of a dog barking. Not Hope. Some other dog keeping watch over some other piece of the night. She slipped the window open, listened. Silence from inside. She eased herself through, landed softly in the dark basement, let her eyes adjust. Shapes emerged from the blackness. Filing cabinets, desks, shelves of documents stacked floor to ceiling. The smell was familiar. Old paper, dust, particular staleness of places where truth gets buried under procedure. She moved, carefully, each step deliberate, feeling her way more than seeing the east wall. Otto had said east. She found the filing cabinets, ran her hand along them. Counting 1, 2, 3, the third one, she opened the top drawer. Too high. Checked the second. Wrong contents, the third drawer. She pulled it open slowly. The scrape of metal on metal sounded loud in the silence, but there was no one to hear inside. The county official seal. The stamp used to authenticate documents. The thing that turned a complaint into an official filing that couldn't be ignored. She took it, slipped it into her coat pocket, and that's when she saw the other papers in the drawer. Tax records. But not the public versions she'd seen at the land office. These were the real ones. The ones showing where Cutter's excess collections went, account numbers, bank transfers in Cutter's name, deposits to Richard Marsh, full paper trail of theft spanning 2 years. She hadn't expected this, hadn't known these existed, but here they were. Gift-wrapped evidence. She took them, carefully, every page. Otto must have known these were here, must have seen them 3 years ago when he was investigating. These were what had made him dangerous, what had made Cutter threaten his daughter. These were what he'd been too afraid to use. She folded them, added them to the envelope in her coat, turned to leave, and heard footsteps at the top of the stairs. Nora froze. The door opened. Lamplight spilled down the stairs. A young deputy appeared, the same one who'd been following her earlier, carrying the lamp, yawning, looking half asleep night watch, supposed to be patrolling, finding the warmest, most comfortable place to doze instead. He came down the stairs, slow, tired, not expecting anything. Nora pressed against the wall. Behind the filing cabinet, in the shadow where lamplight didn't reach, the deputy walked to a desk, set the lamp down, pulled out a flask from his coat, took a drink, settled into the chair with a sigh. Nora waited, counting his breaths, watching the lamp. 5 minutes passed, 10. The deputy's head started to droop. His breathing deepened. 15 minutes. His eyes closed. The flask slipped from his hand, caught it before it fell, set it on the desk. His breathing became regular, deep, sleep. Nora waited another 5 minutes to be sure. Then she moved, silent as smoke, past the sleeping deputy, up the stairs, through the door, into the cold night air. Behind her, the deputy slept on, would wake in an hour, wondering if he'd actually dozed off or just imagined it, would never know she'd been there, would never know he'd been 3 feet from the woman who was about to end his employer's career. She made it back to the saloon, climbed through her window, found Hope waiting. The dog's tail wagged once, gentle, like he'd known she'd come back. She sat on the bed, pulled out the seal, the tax records, everything she needed, everything that would end Dale Cutter. She stamped the official seal on her 3 copies of the complaint. The impression bit into the paper. Official now. Undeniable, legal. Then she packed the envelopes, addressed them. Tomorrow she'd send them. Start the process that couldn't be stopped. But there was one more thing. She pulled out fresh paper, wrote a note. You know what happened. You know who did it. The inspector will need your name. You are braver than you believe. N.V. She folded it with Sarah's compass inside. Tomorrow she'd leave it for Carrie, passing the torch, giving the next generation the tools to keep fighting, because this work didn't end with Harlan's Crossing. It never ended. There was always another Cutter, another town, another fight, but for tonight the work was done. In his house on the edge of town, Dale Cutter couldn't sleep. He'd tried. Drank enough whiskey that he should have passed out hours ago. But his mind wouldn't stop. Kept seeing that cavalry roster photograph. Lieutenant Nora Voss. Those eyes. Kept remembering the humiliation, the finger raised in silence, the laughter of other men. Kept wondering what she was doing, what she'd found, what she was building. He knew how she worked. He'd seen it 15 years ago, the way she gathered evidence, piece by piece, witness by witness, building cases that were impossible to fight because they were built on facts instead of accusations, and she'd been in town for 2 days now, walking around, asking questions, going to the land office, visiting the Brennan place. What did she have? What had people told her? He got up, paced, looked out the window at the dark town, his town, the place he'd run for 2 years, where people feared him, respected him, or at least pretended to. But respect built on fear was fragile. He knew that, had always known it, and if she broke the fear, if she showed people they didn't have to be afraid anymore. He poured another drink, hands shaking. The thing was, he'd been something once, before all this, before he let the power corrupt him. He'd joined the cavalry wanting to be a hero, wanting to make a difference, wanting to be someone his father would be proud of. But somewhere along the way, it had twisted. The desire to be respected had become a need to be feared. The want for authority had become a hunger for control. And by the time he realized what he'd become, it felt too late to go back. So he'd leaned into it, became the thing he'd sworn he'd never be. And now she was here, the woman who'd seen through him 15 years ago, who'd made him feel small without saying a word. And she was going to do it again. He knew it. The way you know things in your gut. The way animals know when a storm is coming. She was going to destroy him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it, because you can't fight truth with lies. Not forever. Eventually, the weight of the lies becomes too heavy to carry. He sat down, put his head in his hands, and for the first time in 2 years, Dale Cutter felt something close to regret. Not for what he'd done, not yet, but for what he was about to lose. Nora woke before dawn, had maybe 3 hours of sleep total. But she'd learned long ago that you don't need sleep to do the work. You just need purpose, and she had that. She dressed, checked her documents one final time. Everything was in order, the merchant ledgers, copied and cross-referenced the land office records, names and dates and prices. The Brennan statement, signed and witnessed, the Calhoun case, Carey's story, Otto's failed complaint, the tax records from the courthouse, Cutter's own handwriting showing where the money went. All of it organized, all of it documented, all of it stamped with the official county seal, unassailable. She put on her coat, slipped the main document into the inside pocket, left the 3 sealed envelopes on the table. Hope watched her. Sensing something. Today, she told him. Today it ends. The dog stood, stretched, ready. She went downstairs. Otto was already awake, sweeping. But his movements were distracted, nervous. He looked up when she came down. "You're going to do it," he said. Not a question. She nodded. "Cutter will be at his office by 7:30. He's always there by 7:30. She wrote, "I'll be there at 7. Waiting. Otto set down his broom. "Miss Foss, when you hand him that document, when he reads it, he's going to know his life is over." She looked at him, a man facing the end of everything. "He might do something desperate," she wrote. "I know. But the truth doesn't change because it's dangerous to speak it." Otto nodded slowly. "No, I suppose it doesn't." He went behind the bar, pulled out something. His old marshal's badge. "I'm going to need this today," he said. "I'm going to walk into that office after you leave, and I'm going to take Cutter's badge." "Hold it until the inspector arrives." Nora wrote, "Are you sure?" "No," Otto said honestly. "But I've been afraid for 3 years. I'm tired of it. You showed me what it looks like to not be afraid." "Even when you should be," she wrote. "Fear doesn't make you a coward. Running from it does. You're not running." Otto's eyes were wet. "My daughter, Rachel. When this is over, when Cutter's gone, I'm going to write her. Tell her I finally did the right thing." Nora wrote, "She'll be proud. I hope so." He looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you for reminding this town what courage looks like." She touched his hand briefly, then turned and walked toward the door. Behind her, Otto watched, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt like the man he used to be. The man his daughter might recognize again. Carey was waiting outside. Standing in the early morning cold, she had Sarah's compass in her hand. "I read your note," she said. "About being braver than I believe." Nora stopped. "I want to testify. When the inspector comes, I want to tell them about my father. About what they did to him," Nora wrote. "You're sure?" Carrie's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "No, but I'm going to do it anyway, because you showed me that scared and brave can be the same thing." She held out the compass. "You should keep this. It was your partner's." Nora gently pushed it back. Wrote, "She gave it to me when I lost my way. I'm giving it to you for the same reason. You'll need to know which direction is north, which direction is truth." Carrie's eyes filled with tears. "What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough?" Nora wrote, "Strength isn't not being afraid. It's doing the thing even when you are. You're already strong enough." She touched Carrie's shoulder, then walked away. Carrie stood there, clutching the compass, watching the woman who'd changed everything walk toward the sheriff's office, toward the end of Dale Cutter's reign, toward the beginning of something new, and she knew. Whatever happened next. However scared she was, she would testify. She would tell the truth, because if this silent woman could face down a corrupt sheriff with nothing but paper and courage, then Carrie could face her fear. She could find north. She could finish what her father started. The sun was just breaking the horizon when Nora walked through the main street. The town was waking up. Shopkeepers opening shutters. The blacksmith lighting his forge. Someone sweeping a boardwalk. They all stopped when they saw her. The woman who'd made Rourke back down, who'd questioned the land office, who'd ridden out to see the Brennan family, who'd walked through town like she owned it, even though she'd been here less than 3 days. They watched her walk toward the sheriff's office, watched the yellow dog follow at her heel, and they wondered what was about to happen, because something was about to happen. You could feel it in the air, the way you feel a storm coming even before the clouds gather. Marcus Webb stood in his store doorway, watching. He'd given her his ledgers last night, watched her copy every number, wondered if he'd just signed his own death warrant, watching her walk now, back straight, purpose in every step. He felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years, hope. William Hastings was at his feed store window. He'd been angry for so long, angry and powerless, a dangerous combination that ate a man from the inside. But she'd shown him how to use that anger, how to channel it into something useful. He watched her pass, and he felt his anger transform into something else. Anticipation. John Reeves stood at his forge. The old ledgers he'd given her last night had hurt to open, all those numbers, all that evidence of his own failure to stand up. But she'd taken them, used them, made them matter. He watched her walk, and he felt something shift in his chest, the weight of shame lifting just a little, maybe. Just maybe. It wasn't too late to matter again. Rourke watched from the boarding house window. He'd been up all night, thinking about that list she'd shown him. His crimes, written out in her careful hand. "You can ride with Cutter when he falls, or you can walk away now." He'd made his decision sometime around 3 in the morning. He pulled his deputy badge from his pocket, looked at it one last time. Then he set it on the table, packed his bag. He'd be gone by noon, heading north, away from Harlan's Crossing, away from Dale Cutter, away from the man he'd been when he wore that badge. Maybe he could find a way to be someone else, someone who didn't need to borrow his courage from another man's fear. Nora reached the sheriff's office at 7 exactly. The door was locked, the windows dark. She sat on the bench outside, Hope at her feet, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. The minutes passed. The sun climbed higher, the street filled with more people, all of them stealing glances at the woman sitting outside the sheriff's office, all of them wondering. At 7:15, a deputy came walking down the street. Not Rourke, one of the others. He saw Nora, stopped, looked at the office door, at her, at the growing crowd of townspeople who were finding reasons to be on the street this morning. He turned around, walked away fast, didn't come back. At 7:20, another deputy appeared, started toward the office, saw Nora, saw the people watching, kept walking right past the office, kept going until he was out of town. At 7:25, Otto came out of the saloon, stood on the boardwalk, his old marshal's badge in his hand. He nodded to Nora. She nodded back, witnesses, both of them, to whatever was about to happen. And then, At 7:28, Dale Cutter came walking up the street. He saw her immediately, sitting there, waiting for him. His step faltered just for a moment, then he kept walking. Because what else could he do? He'd told her to be here this morning, to answer his questions, and here she was waiting, with something in her coat pocket that was going to end him. He could see it in her eyes, the same eyes that had looked at him 15 years ago and found him wanting, the same eyes that were about to do it again. He walked up to his office door, stopped, looked down at her. "You're persistent," he said, trying to sound in control. "I'll give you that." She stood, reached into her coat. Cutter's hand moved toward his gun. He pulled out a folder, held it toward him. He took it. His hands were shaking slightly. He hated that she could see that, hated that his body was betraying his fear. "What's this?" She said nothing, just gestured for him to open it. He did, and his world began to end. Page 1. Tax fraud documentation, the merchant ledgers, cross-referenced with the county schedule, every excess payment highlighted, totaled $4,200 over 24 months. His vision blurred at the edges. Page 2. Land theft evidence, the Brennan case, the Calhoun case, dates, details, the burned barn, the forced confession, the connection to Harlan Development Company, the connection to Richard Marsh, the connection to him. His hands started shaking harder. Page 3. Witness statements, Thomas Brennan, Clara Brennan, Marcus Webb, William Hastings, John Reeves, Caroline Calhoun, each one signed, each one dated, each one detailing specific acts of coercion and theft. His breathing got shallow. Page 4. The financial records, his own handwriting, the tax records from the courthouse basement, the ones showing where every stolen dollar went, bank accounts in his name, transfers to Marsh, the complete paper trail of his corruption. His knees felt weak. Page 5. Legal citations, territorial statutes, federal laws, case precedents, every regulation he'd violated laid out in precise legal language. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the paper. Page 6. The conclusion. The evidence speaks for itself. The pattern is clear. Sheriff Dale Cutter has used his position to enrich himself and his family through systematic theft, coercion, and violence. And at the bottom, the final line that made his stomach drop, copies forwarded to Territorial Governor's Office, County Court of Appeals, Prescott Courier Regional Editor. Originals held in trust, the stamp of the county official seal, making it legal, making it official, making it unstoppable. The folder slipped from his hands, fell to the ground. He looked at her, tried to speak. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He tried again. Managed a sound that wasn't quite a word. You can't. But he knew she already had. The envelopes were already sealed, already mailed, already beyond his reach. This wasn't a threat. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a completed action. She'd won before he even knew he was fighting. And inside Cutter's head, a memory surfaced. Sharp and clear and brutal cavalry camp, 15 years ago, hot summer day. He'd tried to give orders to Lieutenant Nora Voss, tried to assert authority he didn't have, tried to make himself feel important in front of other men. She'd raised one finger, just one finger, and he'd stopped talking, mid-sentence, felt his words die in his throat. The other men had laughed, and he'd felt small, insignificant, like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. He'd carried that humiliation for 15 years. Let it fester. Let it turn him into someone who needed power over others to feel like he mattered. And now she was here, destroying him the same way, without violence, without threats, just with truth, organized, documented, undeniable. And the worst part, the part that broke something inside him, she didn't even remember him. To her, he'd been nothing. Just another arrogant officer who needed to be put in his place. Forgotten a week later, he built his entire identity around that humiliation, let it shape who he became, and to her it had meant nothing at all. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He tried to speak again. His voice came out strangled, broken. I was something once. Before, the words wouldn't form, couldn't form. Because what could he say? That he'd been a good man once? That the power had corrupted him? That he'd let fear and shame twist him into something he despised? It was all true, and none of it mattered. The evidence didn't care about his excuses. The numbers didn't care about his reasons. He made a sound, not a word, not a scream, something between a gasp and a cry, the sound of a man whose certainty had just cracked straight through, the sound of a building collapsing from the inside, the sound that three people would hear and remember and describe for years afterward as the moment Dale Cutter broke. His deputies who'd been standing in the office doorway stepped back. One of them looked it away, embarrassed, witnessing something they shouldn't have to see. Cutter gripped the doorframe, his whole body shaking, the adrenaline of performance meeting the cold arrival of consequence. "You can't do this." He tried one more time. The words had no force, no belief behind them. Nora reached out, calmly took the folder from where it had fallen, folded it, put it back in her coat, looked at him one last time, not with anger, not with triumph, not even with contempt, just with completion. The look of someone who'd finished a job, who was already moving on to the next thing. She turned, walked away, didn't look back. Hope followed, the dog who'd chosen her, who trusted her, who knew the difference between a person who was passing through and a person worth following. Behind her, Dale Cutter slid down the doorframe, sat on the ground, put his head in his hands, and the town watched. The whole town, seeing their sheriff break right there in the morning sun, seeing the end of 2 years of fear, seeing what happens when truth finally speaks. Otto stepped off the boardwalk, walked toward the sheriff's office, his old marshal's badge in his hand, ready to do what he should have done 3 years ago, ready to take back what fear had stolen from him, ready to be the man his daughter might recognize again. The sun climbed higher, the day grew warmer, and in Harlan's Crossing, everything was about to change. Word spread through Harlan's Crossing faster than wildfire. The sheriff broke, right there on the ground. In front of everyone, the woman with the silent eyes had done something, given him something, and it destroyed him. By noon, every person in town knew, and Cutter's deputies knew what it meant. The first to leave was young Morrison, the one who'd been following Nora yesterday. He packed his room at the boarding house, left his badge on the dresser, was on a horse heading east by 1 in the afternoon. Didn't tell anyone he was going, just went. Harris was next, still drunk from the night before, sober enough to understand that whatever protection Cutter's badge had given him was gone now. He stumbled to the livery, got his horse, rode out, heading west. Didn't even take his belongings. Just ran. By sunset, 4 of Cutter's 6 deputies had vanished. Like smoke. Like they'd never been there at all. Only 2 remained. Young deputies who didn't know where else to go, who stood uncertainly outside the sheriff's office, looking at their boss sitting on the ground with his head in his hands, not knowing what to do, not knowing if they should help him or run like the others. And then Roark appeared. Roark walked slowly down the main street, his saddlebag over his shoulder, his horse tied at the saloon. People watched him, wondering if he was running too. But he wasn't heading for his horse. He was heading for the saloon, for Nora. She was at her corner table, eating lunch in silence, Hope under the table, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just ended a man's career an hour ago. Rourke stood there, badge in his hand. She looked up at him. "You were right," he said. His voice was quiet. "On the road, when you showed me that list, when you said I could walk away," he set the badge on her table. "I ain't a good man," he said. "Did things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who didn't deserve it, all because I thought the badge made me somebody." She looked at the badge, then at him. "But I don't have to keep being that person," he continued. "That's what you showed me. That it's never too late to stop." Nora picked up the badge, studied it, then she wrote on her paper, "It's never too late to stop, but it takes courage to walk away from who you were." She handed him the badge back. Rourke looked confused. "I don't understand," she wrote. "Keep it somewhere as a reminder, not of who you were, but of who you chose not to be anymore." Rourke's throat was tight. "I'm leaving, heading north, going to start over somewhere nobody knows my name." She wrote, "Good luck. Be better than you were." He nodded. Couldn't speak. Just nodded. Then he turned and left, walked to his horse, mounted up, and rode north without looking back. One more deputy gone, but this one leaving for the right reasons, leaving because a silent woman had shown him that change was possible, that redemption wasn't about grand gestures. It was about the simple choice to stop doing harm. Otto walked into the sheriff's office at 2 in the afternoon. Cutter was at his desk, bottle of whiskey in front of him, half empty. He looked up when Otto entered. "Come to gloat?" Cutter asked. His voice was hollow, empty of everything except defeat. "No," Otto said. "Come to do what I should have done 3 years ago." He walked to the desk, held out his hand. "Your badge," Otto said. Cutter looked at him. "Broken. You have no authority." "I have more than you do now," Otto said gently. "The town knows what you did. The evidence is already submitted. The inspector's coming. It's over, Dale." Cutter's hand went to the badge on his chest, touched it like it was the only thing holding him together. "I was something once," he said, "before this town. Before I let it all," he trailed off. "Couldn't finish." "We all were," Otto said, not unkindly. "The difference is what we choose to do when we realize what we've become." There was a long silence. Then Cutter unpinned the badge. Slowly, like it hurt to let go, handed it to Otto. "Where is she?" Cutter asked. "The woman." "Voss? Packing," Otto said. "She'll be gone by morning." Cutter laughed. "Bitter sound. Of course she will. Doesn't even stay to watch me fall." "She doesn't need to," Otto said. "She already knows how it ends." He looked at Cutter, saw the broken man who'd terrorized this town for 2 years, saw what fear and power had turned him into, and he felt something unexpected, pity. "You could have been different," Otto said quietly. "You had the position, the respect. You could have been the kind of sheriff this town needed." "But I wasn't," Cutter said. "No," Otto agreed. "You weren't." He turned to leave, stopped at the door. "For what it's worth," Otto said, "I understand. How easy it is to become the thing you swore you'd never be. How one compromise leads to another until you don't recognize yourself anymore." Cutter looked up. "You?" "Me," Otto said. 3 years ago, when I backed down and I let fear make my choices. I became someone I couldn't stand to look at. What changed?" "She did," Otto said simply. "Showed me what it looks like to not let fear win, even when you should be afraid." He left, taking the badge with him, and Cutter sat alone in the office that was no longer his. In the town, he'd run through fear and violence, wondering when exactly he'd crossed the line from lawman to criminal, wondering if there'd been a moment he could have turned back, poker, wondering if it mattered now. Nora packed methodically, the way she always packed. Everything had its place. Everything was accounted for: her saddlebags, her few clothes, her papers, the copy of the complaint she'd kept for herself. The 3 sealed envelopes sat on the table, ready to be mailed. Tomorrow someone else would send them, Otto probably, or Carrie. She'd be gone before they went out. That's how it always was. She did the work, gathered the evidence, built the case, and left before the resolution came. She didn't need to see Cutter arrested, didn't need to witness the investigation, didn't need the thanks. The work was the point, not the recognition. Sarah had taught her that. The mission matters more than the medal, Sarah used to say. If you're doing it for applause, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Nora looked around the room. 2 days she'd been here, 2 days, and she'd ended a corrupt sheriff's reign without firing a shot, without even speaking more than a handful of words. The power of silence, the power of patience, the power of truth organized and documented and impossible to deny. That was her weapon, the only one she needed. Hope sat on the bed, watching her pack. "We're leaving," she told him, "early tomorrow." Before sunrise, the dog's ears drooped slightly, like he understood, like he knew that movement was part of this life now. "There's another town," she said, "another place that needs what we do." "There's always another place." Hope moved closer, rested his head on her leg. She touched his fur. "You chose to follow me. You know that, right? You could have stayed here. Otto would have taken you, or the Brennans. Emma wanted you to stay." The dog looked up at her with eyes that said he'd made his choice and he wasn't changing it. "All right, then," she said softly. "We'll go together." There was a knock at the door. Carrie stood in the hallway. Her face was pale but determined. "You're leaving," she said. "Not a question." Nora nodded. "But the inspector hasn't come yet." "You won't be here to testify," Nora wrote. "I don't need to testify. The documents speak for themselves. And you'll be here. You'll tell them what happened to your father. Carrie's hands shook. What if I can't? What if I can't? What if I freeze up? What if they don't believe me? Nora wrote, you won't freeze. You'll remember why you came back. Why you spent 6 months hiding who you were. Why you gathered information, even when you were afraid. She picked up Sarah's compass from the table. The one she'd given Carrie the night before. You gave this back to me, Carrie said. Nora shook her head, wrote, no, I left it with you. It's yours now. You'll need it more than I do, but it was your partner's. It meant something to you, Nora wrote. It still does. That's why I'm giving it to you. Sarah gave it to me when she was dying. Told me to use it to find North, to find truth. Now I'm passing it to you. She closed Carrie's fingers around the compass. You're really not staying, Carrie whispered. You're not even going to see him arrested, Nora wrote. Justice doesn't need me to witness it. It needs you. The people who live here, the people who'll rebuild what he broke. But you did all the work. Nora wrote, I did my part. Now you do yours. Testify. Tell the truth. Help this town heal. That's the work that matters. Carrie was crying now. How do I do what you do? How do I be that strong? Nora wrote, you don't have to be me. You just have to be someone who tells the truth, even when it's hard. That's all courage is. Doing the hard thing anyway. She touched Carrie's shoulder. Will I ever see you again? Carrie asked. Nora wrote, probably not. You'll hear about me in other towns, other stories, and you'll know someone's still fighting. She wrote one more thing. And when you look at that compass and wonder which way to go, remember, north is always truth, no matter how hard it is to reach. Carrie hugged her suddenly. Fiercely, Nora stood stiff for a moment, then slowly put her arms around the girl, held her. Thank you, Carrie whispered, for showing me I could be brave. When Carrie left, Nora stood alone in the room. The compass was gone, passed to the next generation. The torch had been handed off, and tomorrow she'd ride south, to the next town, the next fight, the next promise to keep. Night fell over Harlan's Crossing. Nora sat by the window, watching the town settle into darkness. Lights appeared in windows. Voices drifted up from the saloon below. Normal sounds. Life continuing, but different now. You could feel it, the subtle shift, the loosening of something that had been tight for too long, fear leaving, hope returning. Otto came up with a plate of food. Set it on her table. On the house, he said. Last meal before you go. She nodded, thanks. He sat down, uninvited but welcome. I wrote to my daughter, he said, told her what happened. Told her I finally stood up. Told her I understand if she can't forgive me, but I wanted her to know I tried to be the man she thought I was. Nora wrote, she'll forgive you. You don't know that, she wrote. I know that courage is harder to stay angry at than cowardice. You were a coward before. You're not anymore. She'll see that. Otto smiled sadly. I hope you're right. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Can I ask you something? Otto said finally. Why do you do this? Move from town to town. Take down corrupt officials. Never stay to see the end. What's the point? Nora pulled out a worn photograph from her pocket, showed it to him. 2 women in cavalry uniforms. Young, smiling, arms around each other's shoulders. Sarah Mackenzie, Otto said. I remember her, Nora wrote. She was killed investigating corruption. Made me promise to finish the work, to never stop, to keep fighting even when it seemed hopeless. And you keep that promise by doing this, she wrote. I keep it by doing what she can't. Every town I fix is a town she didn't die in vain for. That's a heavy promise to carry, Otto said. She wrote, all promises worth keeping are heavy. That's how you know they matter, Otto stood. For what it's worth, Miss Voss, this town is better because you came, and will remember you, even if we never see you again. After he left, Nora lay down on the bed, fully clothed. Reddy Hope curled against her side. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 8 months, she felt the weight lift just a little. 7 towns, 7 corrupt officials brought down, 7 promises kept. Sarah would be proud. Tomorrow there would be an 8th. Nora left before dawn. The sky was still dark, stars fading. First hint of blue on the eastern horizon. She led her horse quietly through the empty street. Hope at her heel. No goodbyes, no fanfare. Just the way she'd arrived, silent. At the edge of town, she stopped. Looked back. Harlan's Crossing was still sleeping, unaware that the woman who'd saved it was already gone. But they'd wake up to a different town, a town without fear, a town with a chance to heal. That was enough. She mounted her horse, turned south, and rode into the growing dawn. Behind her in the saloon, Otto found the 3 envelopes on the bar, addressed, stamped, ready to send. He smiled. She'd left them for him, trusted him to finish this last piece. He'd take them to the post office when it opened. Make sure they reached the territorial governor, the court, the newspaper. Make sure the process she'd started couldn't be stopped. In her room above the saloon, Carrie woke to find a note under her door. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think. The compass will show you north. Trust it. Trust yourself. And V, she clutched the compass, felt its weight in her palm, and knew. When the inspector came, when they asked her to testify, she would tell the truth about her father, about what they'd done to him, and she wouldn't be afraid, because a silent woman had shown her that fear doesn't have to win. 11 days later, the territorial inspector arrived, Inspector Morrison, deputy marshal, court clerk. They rode in with official papers and authority to investigate. Morrison was a gray-haired man with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. He'd received 3 copies of the same complaint. Governor's office, Court of Appeals, his own desk, each one sealed with the county official stamp, each one signed by Nora Voss. Most thorough documentation I've ever seen, he told Otto. Where's the woman who compiled it? Gone, Otto said. Left the day after she submitted it. I need to interview her. Then you'll have to track her, Otto said. And from what I know of her, you won't find her unless she wants to be found. Morrison sighed. Then I'll work with what she left. And there's plenty. He set up in the church, called witnesses. Carrie stepped forward first. My name is Caroline Calhoun, she said. Her voice was clear, steady. The compass hung around her neck. I'm the daughter of Thomas Calhoun, and I have testimony about what happened to my father. She told them everything. The arrest, the beating, the forced confession, the stolen land. And she didn't shake, didn't falter. She found north, and she spoke truth. The merchants testified. Webb, Hastings, Reeves, each one with their ledgers, each one with their stories of systematic theft dressed up as taxes. The Brennan family testified, Thomas and Clara, describing the barn fire, the coercion, the forced sale. Morrison took notes, asked questions, cross-referenced everything against the documentation Nora had left. The case was overwhelming. By the end of the week, Morrison had enough to recommend criminal prosecution. Cutter was arrested, led away in chains. He made eye contact with Otto once as they took him. Otto nodded. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. 2 men who'd both failed in different ways. One who'd found redemption, one who'd run out of time. 2 weeks later, things were starting to change, not fixed, not healed completely, but changing. The Brennan family came back to their land. The sale was voided, the property returned. Emma ran through the house, laughing. We're home. We're really home. Thomas and Clara stood in the doorway, watching their daughter, tears in their eyes. They hadn't rebuilt the barn yet. That would take time. Money, work, but they would, because now they had something they hadn't had before. Hope Carrie was working at the land office now, helping families reclaim stolen property. Using the skills she'd learned gathering evidence, she wore the compass every day, touched it when she needed courage, when she had to make hard decisions, when she needed to remember which way was north. Otto hadn't heard back from his daughter yet, but he'd sent the letter, told her everything. Now he just had to wait and hope. But he stood different now, carried himself like he had when he wore a marshal's badge, like a man who'd found his dignity again. He'd carved a sign. Took him 2 weeks to get it right. He hung it above the bar on a rainy morning. Only a few people watched. It wasn't a celebration, just a quiet acknowledgement. The sign read, She came quiet. She left it right. Someone asked, will she ever come back? Otto looked at the rain. At the road south. She doesn't come back. She just moves forward. To where? Wherever she's needed next. The town wasn't perfect. Some people still supported Cutter. Some thought the investigation was overreach. Some missed the old order, even if it was unjust. But most people felt lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted. They could speak again, question again, hope again, And that was enough. That was everything. 300 miles south, in a town called Redemption, a woman on a gray mare rode slowly down the main street. She had a yellow dog at her horse's heel, walking steady, healthy now, fur clean, eyes bright. The woman stopped at the edge of town, watched as a man in a sheriff's uniform struck a child in the street, hard enough to knock the boy down. The man laughed, walked away like he'd done nothing wrong. The child lay there, not crying, just accepting, like he'd learned that this was how the world worked, that violence was normal, that fear was the price of living. The woman's expression shifted. That same shift from watching to deciding. She dismounted, tied her horse to a post. The dog looked up at her, understanding they'd been here before. Would be here again. She knelt beside the child, checked his jaw where he'd been hit. Gentle hands, surgeon's hands. The boy flinched at first, then relaxed when he felt her touch. Careful? Kind? Who are you? He whispered. She didn't answer, just helped him to his feet, gave him water from her canteen, pointed toward a woman watching from a doorway. The boy's mother, terrified but unable to intervene. The boy ran to her, safe, and Nora Voss stood in the street of this new town, looking at the sheriff's office, at the badge glinting in the afternoon sun. Hope sat at her heel. Patient loyal. She touched her pocket, where she kept her papers, her pen, her tools, not guns, not violence, just truth, and the patience to document it. Here, she said quietly to Hope. This one. The dog's tail wagged once. Agreement. She walked toward the saloon, to find the corner table, to begin watching, cataloging, counting, to start the work that would end another corrupt official's reign, because there was always another Cutter, another town, another fight, and there was always a woman who knew exactly what to do about it. She wouldn't announce herself, wouldn't stay for thanks, but when she left, and she always left, the town would be different, not because she fought loud, because she worked silent, and silence, when it carried the weight of truth, was the loudest sound in the world. The saloon door swung closed behind her. The dog followed, and in Redemption, nobody knew yet that their world was about to change. Nobody knew that a silent woman with gray-green eyes had just decided to stay. Just long enough to finish the work, just long enough to keep the promise made to a dying friend 8 months ago, the promise that had no end, the promise that moved from town to town, from corrupt official to corrupt official, from injustice to justice, the promise that said, some things are worth fighting for, and some fights are worth fighting quietly. And as the sun set over Redemption, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Nora Voss sat in the corner, back to the wall, eyes watching, mind working, already building the case, already gathering the threads, already writing the truth that would set another town free, the way Sarah had taught her, the way she'd done it 7 times before, the way she'd do it as many times as it took, until there were no more Cutters, or until there were no more breaths left in her body, whichever came first. But until then, the work continued. The promise was kept, and somewhere, riding quiet through the endless frontier, there was always a woman who knew exactly what needed to be done, and the courage to do it in silence.